This episode highlights a writer's experience applying the principles that I teach and implement with my writers. I'm talking today about a writer who had tapped into every free piece of content that she could find, and it kind of backfired on her. I'll show you what she was doing, what mindsets and perspectives we shifted, and how that impacted her memoir manuscript. Let's get started. You might be similar to this writer of mine. You're listening to free content right now. That's what this podcast is. There is so much information available to you, from Facebook groups to podcast episodes like this one, to blog posts, YouTube videos, and your old-fashioned Google search. How often have you Googled some question about memoir writing because you know that you're missing something? You know that there's something that isn't clicking, that you're missing in your process, in your knowledge bank, that once you know it, everything's going to fall into place. You are just waiting for that magic wand of information that's going to make everything make sense. The problem with free memoir advice is that even though it has its place and can keep you going to a point, you can also overconsume and start to feel like you are drowning in information. One of my clients came to me after reading blog posts, listening to podcasts, and spending hours in Facebook groups, only to feel even more overwhelmed than when she started. So in today's episode, I will share how we cut through the noise, uncovered her memoir's message, and then crafted a strategy to move forward with confidence. The internet's wonderful. We know this. There are many wonderful things about the internet. It makes life a lot easier. It makes writing in many ways a lot easier. And also, we are very well aware of the more shadow side of the World Wide Web, right? And so I want to talk about all of the free content that's out there. You have creators like me, even, who are creating all this free content for you to help you. We want to create value-driven content. That is kind of what the businessy side of this is called. We want to create content that has value to you. So this client had consumed every free resource that she could find. Blogs, podcasts, YouTube videos, you name it. Like, if you have a minute, I would even recommend you pulling out some paper and writing down all the different free resources that you've tapped into as a memoir writer. Maybe you have a tab on your web browser with memoir material or memoir whatever, right? The tricky thing, though, is that instead of feeling equipped to write, instead of feeling like, I can do this, she just felt paralyzed. She had all of this information. She had consumed so much information about memoir and memoir writing that she didn't know what to do with it. She didn't know how to apply any of this to her own story. And she pulled in that concept that I talked about in the last episode, that I don't know what I don't know. I know all these things. I've spent all this time learning all these things about memoir and about writing, but there's still something that I don't know. So what is it? And that's the thing. Free advice can give you a great general knowledge base. Like, I have found so much value in my own life, both with writing and in just other areas of my life, in free content. So free advice can give you great general tips, but it's not going to tell you what is missing in your specific manuscript. It can't do that. Like this podcast episode, this entire podcast of all the episodes, I can pour out all of the mindsets and reframes, and I can tell you all these different problems that you could be having, and I can even tell you why you're having them. But when it comes to actually applying that and fixing it, this type of free content can only go so far, right? In helping you understand your own manuscript better. You as the listener, as the writer, have to kind of be the bridge between what you are receiving from free content and how you want that to apply to your manuscript. And the other thing about free content is that you might get some stuff that is a little contradictory. There's so many creators out there. There's so many editors. You have many editors from which to choose when it comes to your memoir. You have many podcasts from which to choose to learn. And you get to choose all your inputs. And sometimes, and I speak from experience, you choose too many. And so there's all these voices in your head, and it kind of crowds out your own, right? I use my free content to help you identify what it is that you are missing as a writer. And I want to equip you with the basics of what you need to move forward. But I cannot create free content like this podcast that is going to speak directly to you in your manuscript. You will always be working through an added layer of context that is going to require you to translate this free content that you're consuming into strategies that will actually work for your memoir. And that can be really hard to do, especially when you've filled your brain with the voices and noise from a lot of other creators, a lot of other editors. And there's a lot of editing advice and strategies out there. And I love that there's so much out there for you, because what works for one person isn't going to work for another. That's why I love that there's so many different people out here to help us, because writing, especially life, but writing is not a one-size-fits-all process. So if you're here listening to this episode, there's something about what I'm saying, how I present, that resonates with you, right? There's something about you and me that's a match. And so that's why you're here. And maybe you've been through other editors, other writing coaches, other teachers who have resonated maybe for a time and then didn't, or you listened to something someone said and like, that actually does not fit at all. You're going through this constant mental filter of your inputs, and it can get exhausting, and it can be hard to know what to do with all the information that you've collected in your brain. So let's go back to this writer, one who had gone through all the free content that she could, and then just was kind of left thinking, well, now what? The first step for us was to set aside what she had already written, which feels counterintuitive to you, I know, but we set aside the existing draft and we focus on your story's message. We focused on this writer's message. What was it that she actually wanted to say? We asked, what do you want your reader to take away from this? Why does this story matter to them? And once we'd worked through those questions and had those answers, we were able to start cutting through the overwhelm. Once we had that clarity, that strategy to pull into the draft, then we could bring the manuscript back into play. Then we could bring that back in and start playing with it and figuring out what we needed to refine. With a clear message in mind, she was able to sort through all of the advice that she'd gathered, and she was able to focus on the tips that actually applied to her story. She stopped trying to do everything and started identifying the few elements that she really did need to make progress. And as far as the free content that I provide for you, I want this to be tools that you can adapt. I am not the kind of editor who's going to say, this is how you write the thing. I want to give you tools and processes and mindsets that you can adapt to your writing process. Everything I say, like I've worked with writers and I'll say, okay, like we need to work on ABC to make progress. And I've had a writer come back to me and say, actually, I need to write this out first and then can we sort through that? Absolutely. These tools that I share with you are supposed to be flexible because your story is unique to anyone else's story that I've ever worked with, right? So we used her message to create a clear editorial strategy for her writing. And then we were able to adapt the relevant writing advice and discard the rest. Learning how to sort through all of the information that you've gathered in your brain takes some practice, but it's worth the effort, and I'm here to help you with that. So at the end of our work together, she had a very clear plan for her memoir, and she felt confident in her writing process and in her writing framework and rhythms for the first time in months. And the best part, this was the best part, she said, I finally feel like I know what I'm doing. As your editor, I am not here to highlight or point out everything that you don't know and make you feel dumb for it. Like, that's not how I work. I want you to feel like you know what you're doing. I want to teach you and I want to help you hone that wonderful mind of yours so that you can see your story clearly, so that you can feel confident in the actual writing process. I'm here to be a support to you. I'm not here to take over your work. If you come across an editor like that, I recommend steering clear and finding someone who really is supportive. That is what you want from an editor. And that's what you want from the different writing advice. You want an editor who can help you filter through all the different free content that you've consumed and help you find the tips, the strategies, the frameworks that are actually going to be helpful for you. So if you are overwhelmed by all of the advice, I want you to take a step back and ask yourself the question, what is my message? Once you know that, you can filter out the noise and you can focus on what really matters to your reader. What is it that you're trying to say? Put aside everything that you've worked on. Close all of the tabs in your browser and ask yourself what you're trying to say. And once you know that, then we can play around with different writing strategies, with different writing skills. But you have to know what it is that you're writing and why you're writing it. Knowing that message and that thread, that's going to cut through the noise better than anything, I promise. My guess is that most of you listening to this are going to relate to this feeling. This is a free podcast after all. So go ahead, hop on my email list for exclusive insights and resources to move your memoir forward. I'll put all the links in the show notes for this. I am here to support you. I'm here to empower you. I'm here to make it so that you can see your story clearly so that you know how to move forward as an author with a reader on the other side of the page. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will see you on Friday.